Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan doing a live stream on multiple platforms for the first time, thanks to my friends and supporters. And I wanted to come on in multiple platforms because of the existential moment we're all living in. And I guess I want to start, not assuming that people know my background, but just say briefly that I grew up in Flushing, Queens, New York, 1.3 miles from Donald Trump. And so I've known of Donald Trump my whole life. I got recruited into a front group of the Moonies cult in 1974 while at Queens College after a girlfriend dumped me and three women flirted and lied to me. And I became a right-wing fascist who thought that democracy was satanic, that we had to infiltrate the government, that we would eventually change the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who broke the Moonies rules. I was sent to fast for Nixon during Watergate, and I was a fanatic. I was gone. And if it wasn't for a near fatal van crash and 2 weeks in the hospital and me calling my sister, not because I had any doubts, but because I was bored and I missed her, which led to a deprogramming where I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing, the 8 criteria of Robert J. Lifton in his seminal 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. And I was like, what happened to my mind? How did they do this to me? And I was so upset, embarrassed, ashamed, but I also knew I was a good kid, intelligent, from a nice family with good education, but I had been totally taken over. And it was thanks to Dr. Lifton who encouraged me to study psychology. And here I am 48 years later, 4 books later, 4 TEDx talks later. I'm a licensed mental health professional. And what I want to say is, since 1976, when I got out, the media has been coming to me to comment on every major cult story. In fact, after Jonestown, Senator Dole wanted me to speak at a hearing in Washington, D.C. And a bizarre thing has been happening, especially when the cult of Trump was released in 2019. Nobody wanted to have me on. And when I was on, it was a short thing here or there. When I was interviewed for print media, newspapers, and whatever, I would be deleted from the final copy of the article. So what I'm doing now is I'm realizing I need to communicate directly to people who want to learn about brainwashing and mind control, who care about the fact that democracy is under assault in a way we have not seen before in the United States of America. And I intend to do a lot more of these direct live streams, as well as my weekly podcast, the Influence Continuum podcast and blog that goes on my Substack. And I have some words, and then we're going to do questions and answers on this live stream. But what I want to say is that the media is not saying worthwhile frames of information for the public in their analysis of what went wrong in the election and how there was a total sweep of the GOP in all the swing states, and how Donald Trump, a convicted felon, um, who is a pathological liar and a malignant narcissist and who is constantly displaying dementia, got elected to the highest office in the United States. So my frame is one of brainwashing, mind control, undue influence, social psychology. Okay, so that's what my PhD is on, is to connect the dots with theories of brainwashing, trafficking law, sex and labor trafficking. I did the first a quantitative study on a model called my bite model of authoritarian control to update the law to show that it's not a slippery slope to define the differences between an ethical group, an ethical recruitment process, and a deceptive one that involves hypnosis and behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And in all the media pundits' analyses, they're talking about what the American people want. And I listen to this and I think, excuse me, we have been a victim of mimetic warfare, memes, mimetic warfare, information warfare through our social media, through our smartphones, yes, through politicians who've been co-opted and other mainstream media, corporate media. And I guess I want to start by saying that I decided when I wrote The Cult of Trump to start with Edward Bernays' work in 1928. He wrote a book called Propaganda. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he was the first person to connect the dots with psychology and politics. He ran the first presidential campaign and psychology and business. And part of what he was teaching was you don't sell people products, you sell people the need for a product. And so I decided to start my book there because I want the public to understand that Donald Trump is not a mastermind. This is not a fluke that just came haphazardly into our lives. This has been a multi-decade mind control project, and that's why I started this live stream talking about the Moonies and how I got in 1974. Because back then we wanted to do exactly what Donald Trump and the Christian nationalists are doing right now. And Opus Dei through the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. I was in the room with Moon as this was being discussed 50 years ago. And I've been a whistleblower for 50 years, very consistently. And I get the question all the time, Steve, how do you keep going? How can you do this? And I say, I feel like this is my mission. I feel like was put in this wacko extremist right-wing cult that owns the Washington Times, that has an AR-15 gun factory in Pennsylvania, and a gun cult that was sponsoring Rod of Iron festivals with Michael Flynn in the run-up. And so I really feel like this is my expertise. And going forward, my lane is psychology, and not just how people can be radicalized, but how do people get de-radicalized? And this is my work. When I first got deprogrammed from the Moonies, I did deprogramming on Moonies, and that evolved to exit counseling, and that evolved to what I've been doing called the strategic interactive approach. And I can tell you from my experience, brainwashing and mind control is not 100%. It doesn't erase the core person's identity, even if they're born into a mind control authoritarian cult. And that the human spirit responds to love, responds to respect, responds to genuine compassion and caring. And people don't like to be lied to and exploited and manipulated and harmed. And so one point I want to stop and just say that there's been a failure of imagination in the general public to understand the depths of destructive influence that's been exerted on us because good people can't imagine doing such evil things. But because it happened to me, I can imagine it because I was like made a leader to do it on other people. And I really believed I was doing God's will by following Sun Myung Moon. Truly. And if Moon said, take this AR-15 and go into a city and kill as many people as you can, I would have done it mindlessly and unswervingly. In fact, Moon held me up as a model member to the membership at one point. So because I am a whistleblower, you can count on me going forward because I've been doing this work for 48 years. I actually know what I'm talking about, and I can give the citations, I can teach social psychology, I can give instructions of what to do and what not to do if you have a loved one who's been radicalized. And so there's a lot to teach, there's a lot to learn, and I encourage people to not give up hope and to join freedom of mind effort. And we say it's your mind and only you should control it. And don't let other people take advantage of you and exploit you. And so coming forward, aside from my online course, I'm going to be doing more teaching, more courses, as long as I can. I hope the cult of Trump is not banned. I fear that it might be banned, maybe combating cult mind control and freedom of mind may be banned also. But right now you can get it. You can get it at libraries if you don't have money to order it, and they're on Audible and audio as well. But the solution is going to be knowledge. And trust me, your anxiety level is going to go down the more you understand how this is a systematic social influence process that's been leveled on the public. And people wake up, like myself. I needed help, and most people do need help. But it doesn't have to be direct help. And what's so interesting since 2019, especially, thanks for putting up my books. Um, what's so interesting is that the public has a hunger for cult documentaries, for podcasts by former members. People are writing books, popular books. But I can say, as a generalization, even though I've been interviewed hundreds of times, when I look at most documentaries, it's like trauma porn. It's like telling crazy stories of what happens to real people, but it doesn't explain in easy to understand terms how this is done to people or what to do to get people out. So my hope is to share my expertise, to reach out to tens of millions of Americans who are former cult members, whether they were born in an authoritarian religious cult, political cult, family system, whether they were in a authoritarian corporation or a multi-level marketing cult, or a bad therapist cult. Um, I want to reach out to everyone who's had this firsthand experience, as well as their family and friends, and say, it's time to share. Like, get over the embarrassment. Yes, it happened to me. I didn't know what I didn't know. Just get over it because we need to create a platform for people to exit. We need an ramp for tens of millions of Americans because they will wake up and realize how they've been conned and how Trump is really about billionaires working for the oil companies and oil countries and big pharma and doesn't give a rat's ass about working class people and human rights. And once people realize that, they're going to get very upset. And we have to organize in a way that makes sense because you know what? Human beings are human. We're not androids. Elon Musk wants us to put our consciousness into androids and fly to Mars. Excuse me, Elon, a little bit too many psychedelics, my man, or maybe Russia hypnotized you too many times while you were tripping your head off. I just listened to a New York Times podcast this morning on the radicalization of Elon Musk. People don't realize, cults target people and they figure out which buttons to push
I'm sorry
that
to
will
interject, Steve.
motivate people. Sure.
You have a ton of questions, and so I just wanted to make sure that
Thank
people
you.
got some questions out here, and you got to take a look at them before we
Thank
ended
you.
the stream. Your first question is from SP. It says, "Hi, my question is, who to go to when there's undue influence being backed by the state and county police. I'm in the town of Lincoln near Oneida, New York, and have documented years of almost unbelievable activity."
I'm sorry, and I honestly don't know who you can go to. I get a ton of emails from people telling me, investigate this group, investigate that group. I'm a small therapist who has a bunch of part-time caring volunteers and part-time workers for freedom of mind, and I don't have the resources to do what needs to be done. I was talking 9 years ago about creating a Manhattan Project, like getting the funding to get all the best minds who know about brainwashing, mind control, and hypnosis in a room, people who understand state actor radicalization online, but nothing happens. So I'm sorry at the moment, I can't help. Let's see, the next question. To be clear, do you believe conservatives who are on the right want to destroy democracy? Absolutely not. I do not believe that good people want to destroy anything. I think they've been lied to. I think they've been co-opted and they haven't done their homework. And when they realize, when they step back and look at the facts and understand my influence continuum and bite model and read The Cult of Trump, they'll understand what I'm saying makes a ton of sense and has been validated. The next question, Dr. Hassan, I'm deeply concerned Trump is going to get rid of the Second Amendment. This is a New York Times article about it. What should we do if he succeeds? Um, I've been messaging for years that there's a takeover. And I interviewed a former KGB official, Yuri Shvets, with Craig Unger when Craig's book, um, American Compromat, came out. I have a two-parter. It's on my Substack now. You can watch the videos. And Yuri said, "Oh, I was higher up in the KGB than Vladimir was, and we recruited Trump in the 80s." And he went on to talk about the place in New York City where Trump bought all kinds of television sets on the cheap for one of his hotels and went on and on and on. Those who've studied Russian intelligence operations understand that Putin grew up in an authoritarian cult of the Soviet Union. He was a KGB official. He was very upset the Soviet Union fell, wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union under him. That's the reason behind the attack on Ukraine, etc. But his major project is to destroy the United States of America so that they're not interfering with him, so he can get access to his billions of dollars from the Magnitsky Act that was passed. So we have a state actor who has been operating, and I put Putin at the top of chapter 7 of the Puppet Masters, along with a number of other authoritarian cults. I can go on, but I really want to pay attention to the questions. So the next
Yeah,
one is,
I think
we
that they
read a
also
New
meant
York
the
Times.
First Amendment. I'm sorry, Steve. I think they may have meant the First Amendment, not this, or maybe they meant the Second Amendment. I'm not sure. Second
Well,
Amendment is
the
right
the
to bear
Second
arms.
Amendment is guns, right?
Right, right.
And the First Amendment is speaking your mind
Yeah, yeah.
and religious freedom. So I have a whole riff I'd like to make. I'll do it very short talk on the Koch corporate empire, second largest private corporation in the United States. I have numerous blogs and interviews. I interviewed a man who wrote Cokeland. about this corporate cult. And it's the Kochs that are behind the free speech movement, only they don't want anyone saying anything negative about climate change. They don't want to slow down their fossil fuel productions because of profits and because they're libertarians. So there's a really corrupt notion about free speech. And the fundamentals of free speech is that you are not allowed to cry fire in a crowded theater if there isn't a fire, because it's called a lie. And because it can cause public harm and a panic if people are trying to escape what they think is a deathly situation. But people are confused, disoriented, distracted. Um, and I also want to comment. I interviewed David Lipsky on his book, The Parrot and the Igloo, where he outs my former cult, the Moonies, and the Washington Times, their newspaper, as the single biggest purveyor of climate science denial in the United States for 50 years. They platformed so-called experts saying, well, there's no real science, just like big tobacco used experts to say there's no link to prove that it causes cancer when the tobacco companies knew it caused cancer. Similar phenomenon. Okay, next. You read Trump voters shocked themselves about voting for Trump. You said people could be hypnotized to vote for Trump in the voting booth. What about it? I really have that theory. I think it's very easy to hypnotize people online because there's no regulations online. There are an estimated 5,000 data points that have been collected for every voting American, and they have algorithms and supercomputers. And what has been going on is moving people who are more progressive to extreme radicalism on the left, and people who are conservative to more extreme radicalism and conspiracy theories on the right. Why? Because they want conflict. They want chaos. They want uncertainty. Why? Because if you want to brainwash people, it's the ideal condition. When people know who they are, they're clear-minded, they've slept 7 to 9 hours, they can think, they use their frontal cortex. When people are anxious and emotionally aroused, they're very easily indoctrinated into radical beliefs. And this emphasis that I keep seeing on disinformation and misinformation, that's a part of the information control of the bite model, deception, but it's not explaining social psychology. It's not challenging the incorrect notion that human beings are rational and think rationally. We're emotional and we rationalize. And likewise, we have an incorrect opinion that we are independent people versus we are part of a hive. We're part of a community, and how other people that we identify with influences us tremendously. And I'll be doing a future live stream explaining the Ash conformity study of the 1950s. Okay, I see I have another question coming up from Witness, or is it Whiteness? We've had hints throughout history, but the internet made indoctrination fairly simple, unfortunately. Yes, yes. In fact, I want to talk about a brand new book that just came out by a Harvard MIT humanist chaplain, Greg Epstein, called Tech Agnostic. I just interviewed Greg. It's on my Substack. And he talks about how tech is now the world religion. And instead of people praying, they're looking at their phones and on their apps, addicted to their apps. And he talks about the beliefs of the billionaires, the tech billionaires like Musk, of long-termism, transhumanism, how crypto is something that's actually a good thing, which I think of it as a multi-level marketing scheme, frankly. Um, Read this book, Tech Agnostic, if you want to understand how technology really has no regulations. And the billionaires didn't want to elect Kamala Harris. They wanted someone they could control to have no regulations. How can you suggest Trump would destroy the First Amendment? Do you not realize Musk bought Twitter to preserve free speech? This seems like propaganda to me, Stephen. I get you, Wes. All I can say is I understand that's your point of view, but Musk is not interested in free speech. I've been throttled on X since I joined. I've lost people, followers, since he took over X. And I was growing I think the last, before Musk took over, I think I had 78,000 or so followers. It's gone down. So the thing is that be open-minded. I am. If you can show me evidence, I'm willing to change my mind and say I'm incorrect. I'd love to talk with Elon Musk and talk about brainwashing and mind control. I read a piece by Walter Isaacson who wrote a book on Musk, who talked about how he had hypnotized his younger sister to eat raw bacon in a trance as a kid. And I assume that it's a correct story. Let's talk about what hypnosis is and what it isn't. It's something I've studied since 1980. I was trained in NLP by the founders, Richard Bandler, John Grinder, all the originals, until I realized it was amoral and decided to become a mental health professional and actually learn how to do hypnotherapy properly. And I also want to state I don't do hypnotherapy as a clinician because I want people to trust me. I explain what it is. I direct people to hypnotherapists who are mental health professionals. Anyway, we'll do another live stream on hypnosis for sure. Matthew Price, we should contact our local representatives, host local meetups, work on education each other about undue influence. Yes, Matthew, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that people need to have a frame, in my opinion, of planetary survival, not apocalyptic stuff that the world's going to be blown up and Armageddon is going to happen anyway and God's going to remake the world or we're going to Mars. I think we need to come back to reality. This is our planet. This is our habitat. This is our home. And we need to think about planetary survival and we need to think about human to human connection, not having relationships with chatbots and with strangers and troll farms. We need to come back to, think globally, act locally, etc. Okay, Jerry, which one should I take? I see two of up here. Which one
Well,
should I do?
they're both kind of in the same genre.
Okay, well, I'll do
One
the
deradicalization.
one-on-one de-radicalization is so hard and slow versus groups radicalizing people and spreading disinformation. How do we scale it with few resources? Start our own counter troll farms? What else? No, I'm not into trolls. I'm really asking people who've had a cult experience, who know someone, a relative, a sibling who's had a cult experience, come out. And I want people to start learning how to share their experience in a way that's going to be helpful. And what I want to say is what doesn't work is attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policies with information or facts, or talking down to people or calling them names. That's going to make them deeper in the rabbit hole and feel persecuted from you. You want to go back to them saying, listen, you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my aunt, you're my uncle. I love you. I want you in my life. Can we reconnect? And here's the good thing about the overwhelming victory of the GOP, believe it or not, is remember before the election, everyone was worried he was going to say the election was stolen and there was going to be civil war in the streets? Gone. They're the dominant party. So they're feeling very strong and powerful. Great. So now we can approach them and say, okay, you won. Wow. Let's talk. Let's discuss things. Let's unpack what you think is going to happen in the next year as Elon Musk is put in place to fire tens of thousands of government workers. Let's talk. But the point isn't winning an argument. The point is asking a question with respect and curiosity and being prepared to change your own mind and modeling that behavior. Active listening is an important skill to learn. Patience, regulation of your own emotional reactions so that you don't get triggered and get angry and upset. We can scale people coming out in large numbers, but it's not by using trolls. It's by having educated agents, real human beings, and not just online. And I do think that there are a lot of video resources if people know to check it out. Like I did a TEDx talk, how can I know if I've been brainwashed? And I specifically created it that way because I want people to privately, for themselves, hear my four-step reality testing strategy and give it a run. And I'm rolling out a shortened bite model anonymous survey that people can test whether they're in an authoritarian religion or corporation or relationship. Okay, Jolly Bridge Burner is the deprogramming of people exiting from high control groups actually creating a cult of another type. So this is a good question, and I've been accused from the moment I was speaking out against the Moonies of being in an anti-cult cult. Um, and this is a feature, and I wrote about this in the Cult of Trump, that that part of mind control is taking the behavior that the cult is doing and projecting it on their enemies in order to deflect, distract, disorient people. But the thing is about my whole approach is I want people to think for themselves. I don't tell them what to think. I don't tell them they should join my religion or non-religion or whatever. I want to share social psychology. I want to share Chinese communist brainwashing models. I want to share what hypnosis is and what it isn't, and how it can be used ethically and how it can be used, and let people make up their own minds. And when people ask me to define what is a cult, I typically show them my influence continuum and say cults exist along the entire continuum, but my concern is authoritarian mind control cults that create a pseudo identity that's dependent and obedient, where people have phobias in their minds and they were afraid to contemplate that they made a mistake or that their leader isn't doing God's will or something. Let's see, Wes FX 2000. If you're willing to talk to people who disagree with you, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Of course, I've been doing this for 48 years. Of course, that's the whole point. And I want to do a shout out to Adam Grant, organizational psychologist. I've read all of his books and I listened to all of his podcasts. He wrote a great book called Think Again. I urge people to consider reading that book. And basically, what he says is, hey, we're humans. We don't know everything. So what's the big deal if we change our mind? What's the problem? The problem typically is ego. People don't want to consider that maybe they believed something that was inaccurate or followed someone who is untrustworthy. And believe me, when I got out of the Moonies, I was ashamed and embarrassed to tell people I was that I dropped out of college, that I had thrown out 400 original poems, that I fasted for Nixon because God wanted him to be president. But I knew who I was before the Moonies. I came from a very loving, intact family and friends. And I was like, damn, if they could have done that to me. And frankly, I helped to recruit a bunch of people into the cult, to which I still feel badly about it, even though I think everybody's now out. Let's see, JC, what percentage of people are highly susceptible to hypnosis? How do we know if we are or not? What are signs of hypnotic techniques? Thank you for all you do. Great questions. I've done some videos on the issue of NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and hypnosis. What I want to say now, because we don't have a ton of time, is that human consciousness, we're awake, we're asleep, and we go in and out of altered states of consciousness throughout the day. And an altered state of consciousness is just a feature of being human. And what I've learned is hypnosis is not sleep, so the root of the word is inaccurate. But what it is a heightened focusing of attention and concentration and absorption. But the critical thing is when you're in that state, often called a flow state, your frontal cortex that analyzes data and thinks is offline. So you're more suggestible to ideas that can be implanted in your mind. And that's why you don't want to allow strangers to hypnotize you. And part of my work is telling people don't go to coaches who are going to do hypnosis on you. Go to a trained clinician who's been trained by the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, a group that I belong to, or the International Society of Hypnosis, because a lot of harm can be done by people who are not properly trained, inducing false memories of sexual abuse, having people believe they were lovers in a past life, all kinds of things. Oh, and I did two chapters in a textbook that came out this year on hypnosis. I did two chapters with Alan Shefflin, who did the first book on MK Ultra, where hypnosis was part of the CIA's approach to create Manchurian candidates. And I used Hubbard of Scientology as the exemplar, because Hubbard was a hypnotist. And Scientology does training routines, which is straight out of hypnosis training. And again, I've done workshops, they're videotaped where I'm explaining this. If you've seen The Vow or know anything about Nexium, you know that they were using neurolinguistic programming, a form of hypnotic, conversational, process-oriented hypnosis on people. So, um, I can go on and on. So, Sailor Moon, Dr. Hassan, you're asking ordinary people to be therapists. No, I'm not. I just want everyone to take responsibility for their own mind, their own body. And if you care about someone that's become a stranger who's espousing wacko conspiracy theories and such, instead of calling them names or blocking them or muting them, learn. Talk to ex-members who have come out of the rabbit hole and learn how to interact with them in ways that build bridges. I've interviewed former members of hate groups. What helped them to get out was people being nice to them and kind to them and thoughtful to them. Why? Because they were programmed to hate the other, and then the other is being nicer to them than their own cult members were. As I said before, people don't want to live in hate and fear and be exploited and lied to. They don't like it. Mitch says, oops, I lost that one. Do bite model analysis of the Democratic and Republican Party. So I use BITE. I don't use the periods, by the way, for those. Just come to freedomofmind.com under Learn. You can download the whole bite model for free. You can download a version of excuse me, a graphic of the influence continuum, and you can print them out and give them to your physician, give them to your dentist, bring them to your kids' schools so that people can get educated at how to tell the difference between ethical influence that empowers people to be themselves versus unethical influence that makes people dependent and obedient on some external authority figure or ideology. Sailor Moon says therapists can only chip away false beliefs slowly so that people won't experience flooding. So, in the world of therapy, and I did do a CE course for clinicians because there's no graduate school training people how to work with people who are born or raised or get recruited into a mind control cult. So I call it a foundational course for clinicians. They can get 9 CE credits. This is a huge epidemic, and people are oblivious. They don't even know to ask questions and start educating people about that. Was there another question that popped up and went away? How are we doing on time? I'm talking pretty fast. I hope I'm not talking too fast, folks, but I'm going to be doing more of these. I really want to encourage you to think about creating freedom of mind communities. And this isn't about Steve Hassan. This is about protecting our minds, protecting our children from undue influence, helping people that we care about in our family and in our community. And instead of devolving, evolving humanity to be our best selves. And am I happy with the Democratic Party? No. Am I happy with the Republican Party? No. Am I a political person? Actually, not really. But I did write The Cult of Trump, guilty. And I was worried about a title like that and a cover like that. But I felt like I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't share my expertise with people who did want to know about it. And I want to say thank you to George Conway, who wrote a foreword for the re-released version of The Cult of Trump, and I have an afterword on it. It's not a totally new book. Ryan Parent, what do you feel is a good direction for cult research? Are there currently any gaps or areas that need more work? Oh my God. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. I can tell you that I served on a dissertation committee of a man who was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses cult, who did a whole study on people who were in their headquarters, Bethel, who had left. And he did a study on what were the factors that caused them to leave, since that was like the top of the pyramid in the Watchtower Society. By the way, people say, you think the Jehovah's Witnesses are a mind control cult? Yes. Look at the bite model analysis on my site. Mormons, yes. Look at QAnon, yes. I did a bite model analysis of that as well. And the beauty of the bite model is you're either controlling sleep or you're not. You're either telling people to change their name or not. You're either telling people to ask permission for major life decisions or not. So you can go through the whole bite model, and actually eventually, once we get this app going, you'll be able to get a number on the influence continuum of how authoritarian your experience is, and it will help people to reality test.
Steve, we've been
Um,
going for 45 minutes, and
yep.
we got a couple more questions, so it's up to you. Whatever you. Wes
Um,
is here on the
yeah,
right.
Wes has commented a couple of times before.
Mhm.
So are you saying Trump brainwashed people to vote for him, so we should not respect the will of the people who voted for him? That is a constructed question that I don't, I think that there's been a lot of brainwashing done by the GOP. I think hypnosis is probably being done, but I really point to mimetic warfare. And just to know that Musk put ads to Palestinians about how Kamala was going to help Israel, and then send messages to Jewish voters that Kamala was going to help the Palestinians. Think about that. If he wants people to make up their own mind, why is did he spend $100 million putting out disinformation and false messaging like that? It's really a good question. Hex says Wikipedia says NLP is a pseudoscience, but I've noticed you say it's used by cult leaders. Is there a difference between clinical and other utility in this context? So
Hmm.
I have a whole blog on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is hacked, and in the realm of cults and brainwashing and mind control, my page has been decimated from what it was when Wikipedia started. And what I've been telling people is, all these large language AI models are using Wikipedia, and there's disinformation like crazy in Wikipedia. Unless you have like actual scholars who know a subject editing, you can't just let the masses decide to put things up on Wikipedia. Guess why? Because if you're in a cult, you have endless money and endless people to keep changing the posts. And folks who have normal jobs can't keep up with that. Um, NLP is something that Tony Robbins learned, taught Donald Trump. I wrote about NLP in the Cult of Trump. And um, all I can say is back to the question about research and cults. We need to do a massive amount of research on hypnosis through the social media because, and I was interviewed by Tristan Harris and Aza Raskin for your Undivided Attention podcast a couple of years ago. And I said one of the features of a hypnotic state is called time distortion. And to explain what that means is you're going on your phone, you say to yourself, I'm only gonna check my Instagram for 5 minutes, and 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I should have gone to sleep 2 hours ago. That's time distortion. This is not a normal frame of mind where you're in control of your time, your mind and your body relationships. James Hoyt Bishop, can cult leaders recover? Good question. That could be a whole live stream in and of itself. What we know about cult leaders is they stereotypically are malignant narcissists. This was a term Eric Fromm came up with when he was analyzing Adolf Hitler. It's the normal narcissism plus the psychopathological stuff, thinking you're above the law, pathological lying, sadistic, paranoid, untrusting, threatening, revengeful. You can download the whole list on my website. And in chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump, I compared Trump with Jim Jones, my former cult leader, Sun Myung Moon, and Hubbard of Scientology, giving specific quotes about all of those things. That said, malignant narcissists think the problem is with everyone else, not them, and they almost will never go into therapy. And what's required, if you want cult leaders to recover, is they have to be willing to learn, humble themselves, be honest, trust the therapist. And it's very, very difficult, if not impossible. Next question. Mike asks, Sam Sater suggested Russian culture has been authoritarian for century and influx into Israel explains authoritarian right turn. Yes, people don't understand that 1 million Russian Jewish emigres went to Israel and they continue to listen to Russian propaganda. I can do a whole live stream on my trip to Russia when the Soviet Union fell. A group of psychiatrists and psychologists brought me there to teach about cults and mind control. But yes, If you're raised in an authoritarian religion or political system, and China is the biggest mind control cult on the planet, bar none. I mentioned China earlier when I was talking about the brainwashing models that helped me to wake up, but for sure. Anyway, when you're raised in that environment, unless you learn what is normal developmental psychology and what is healthy parenting, where you're raising children to think and to question and to make mistakes intentionally, not to train them to be obedient and dependent, you're going to gravitate to authoritarian leaders and other cults. We tend to go where we're familiar, where it's comfortable, and it's not the Judaism that I connect with whatsoever. I'm interested in questioning authority. I'm for human rights, opening the tent, the Abrahamic creed of opening the tent in the desert to anyone who needs food or drink or rest out of the sun. Love is stronger than mind control. And love is the antidote ultimately. Because if my family didn't love me, they wouldn't have gone to the incredible effort they did to get me deprogrammed. And honestly, I didn't want to be deprogrammed. I was that sure I was doing God's will. And what made me agree to it was my father cried, and my dad is very old school. And he said, how would you feel if it was your son who met a controversial group, dropped out of college, quit his job, and disappeared from your life? How would you feel? But the tear is what got to the real me. And I thought, oh, he's been brainwashed by the communist media. And then I thought, well, I'll throw him a bone. I'm going to agree to prove that I'm not brainwashed and to prove I'm not in a cult. So I agreed to meet with the ex-Moonies and learn about brainwashing, etc. And surprise, surprise, I woke up and realized Moon was not the Messiah. He was a pathological liar. He was an abuser. He had children out of wedlock. You know, that there's a whole story of the creation of the Moonies. That's another live stream. I know we're running out of time. Let's see. How to be kind to people who actively believe deporting people who look like me will solve the economy. They've been brainwashed. So, how to be kind? You need to have the understanding that their mind was hacked and be a good human being. And hopefully, they will feel that you're a good person, and maybe their conscience will come back online. That this is not a healthy thing. This is not a good thing. But, everybody has to make their own decisions. And if it's not right for you to talk to family and friends or someone who's been radicalized because you're too traumatized or it's too upsetting for you, don't. I am all about empowering people to be their best selves. And I always say, take care of yourself first and then take care of other people. So I see we're wrapping up. Now we have the influence continuum. Here's some copies of covers of my books. We're going to get an updated graphic to my man of the new one. We'll get you the graphic for the next live stream. But I really want to make an appeal. There are tens of millions of former members, and we can mobilize and support each other and come up with strategies for how to message in a way that's going to improve humanity and not get into a black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil mindset, which is out of the T of the bite model, thought control, because reality is complex and messy. The influence continuum is a continuum, it's not a binary. Mostly everything is in the middle and it's messy. In the end, we want to go to sleep at night 7 to 9 hours, and we want to have a clean conscience that we're a good person, we're contributing, we're doing what we can to make the world and people in our lives better. So Gloria says, thank you. See you next week. Yes, we're going to do it weekly. We may do more. It really depends. But all I can say is I want to build a movement that uplifts human rights, women's rights, gay rights, indigenous rights, rights of minority religions, rights of humanists and atheists. We need to get along together and find common ground. So please consider supporting my work on Substack. Come to my YouTube, come to freedomofmind.com. If you like this, please share it with folks that you are in your network and ask them for comments. And I've been doing lots of interviews and podcasts and such. So if you're listening to this and you're an influencer and you have a ton of followers and you are in a cult, come talk to me. We'll talk together on a live stream if you're open to it. That would be so cool. Or if you've written a good book, I do a weekly interview, typically about a book. The one coming up next week is on called Den of Spies, another book by Craig Unger that is mind-blowingly important for the time that we're in. And I want to thank my people. I want to thank all of my supporters for letting me do this today. I'm wrapping up now. And forgive me for saying I'm not a professional speaker. I guess I need some training. But I care deeply, 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 and for our children, our grandchildren, for all the people who don't have the blessings that I have to be able to get online and have people spreading my work. I'm going to keep doing this, and so thank you very much to everyone, and stay tuned to at Cult Expert on different platforms. Take care.